Hi there, my name is Amy and I'm a personal coach for the Brady Group. Today I'm going to share some things with you that I've discovered after having the opportunity to coach several dental practices over the last few years. You see, as a personal coach for the Brady Group, I have the opportunity week in and week out to virtually be in many practices through Skype. I'm able to hear of their successes from week to week. I'm able to talk with practices about challenges they're facing and work with them to overcome those challenges. We even work in some role playing and do some fun things to help them further fulfill their vision. But I will tell you, as I think over the past several years and the many practices we've worked with, when we first meet a practice, there seem to be mainly three deadly mistakes that they're making that seem to be killing their success or hindering their full potential. There are some commonalities there among many practices, and you might be able to relate to some of these that I'm going to share today. The first one of the three is that we might often be stealing ownership from patients. I don't think this is something that is often even realized, but if you're bringing patients through your practice the traditional way, in other words, they come in and you have a structure and a protocol that serves your purposes. You bring them in and say, okay, what we do on all patients is we're going to take some x-rays, we're going to do a complete and thorough exam, and then doctor's going to tell you what he's found. And then we give them a treatment plan with some solutions, and we try and convince them why they ought to follow through. We might even tell them what's going to happen if they don't follow through. Well, if that resembles what might be happening in your practice, you're probably stealing ownership. And here are some indicators that might be happening. Maybe you talk more than your patients, and you can't seem to get your patients to talk a whole lot. That means you're probably telling, explaining, educating a little too much. You might be hearing things from your patients like, you know, I'm going to check with my insurance and we'll see what they'll cover and then I'll decide whether or not I'm going to do this. Or maybe you hear things from your patients like, I'll call you back. I'm going to check my schedule, or I need to think about it. And again, those are indicators that your patient probably doesn't have a lot of ownership for what's going on. As a result of all of this, you end up with a penny list this thick. Oftentimes I'll get calls and people will ask me, well, what's some verbiage, or can you give me a script for when I'm calling the penny list? And my answer is often, why do we even have a penny list? So let me ask you this, what would it look like if patients scheduled when they were face-to-face before they even left? How would that affect your workload or how your days would go? How would that affect your month? Just bottom line, if you were actually able to schedule most of your patients before they even left. That's what we're talking about here, is allowing your patients the opportunity to come up with their own plan that meets their value system and fulfills their motivation and the things that are important to them. You see, the interesting part is you'll end up in the same place. You'll get to do the same dentistry you would have presented anyway, but you'll get to do more of it because we allow the patient to come up with the treatment plan. So that's number one, is allowing patients ownership. The second thing that I think gets in the way most often is we let the patients run the schedule. So what are some indicators that's happening? Well, if you ever hear yourself saying things like, well, what's good for you? Or when would you like to come in? Then we're letting patients run the show. Or maybe you miss lunch a lot, or you're late to lunch, or late at the end of the day and can't quite seem to finish up, and everybody's trying to wrap things up and get out the door, and it's hurried. Maybe you're stressed out. Maybe you have patients waiting on you. Days where you seem to be the busiest, you might see a lot of patients and get to the very end of that day and you run the day sheet and you produced a whopping $862. Those are indicators that you are letting the patient run the schedule. What would it feel like if you were able to stay on time every day and maybe even meet your production goal before lunch? What if you got a lunch? What if you were actually able to finish up at the end of the day on time and get home with your families? What would that feel like? That's what we're shooting for here. And if you take control of the schedule in a way that creates a win-win, where your patients don't have to wait on you, they get the one-on-one time they deserve, uninterrupted, and you're able to stay on time, that's what we're shooting for. Number three is one of the three things that gets in the way of our fulfilling of our vision and is probably killing the profitability in your practice is we might be confusing busyness for profitability. You see, we think busy is good. Society has told us that. The world has told us that if you're busy, that must be good. You know, if I ask one more person, how's your day going? Oh, I'm really busy. I'm not sure what I'm going to do, because I don't think that's such a good thing. And it shouldn't be in your practice either. See, you want to be profitable, not busy, and the two are totally independent of each other. And so what happens when we're too busy is we don't have time to implement and be consistent with the systems that help us to be successful. See, an example might be collecting money. If you've got a high accounts receivable, you're too busy to be proactive and have the proper systems in place for collecting money, and that lends itself to a high AR, which actually creates more work on the back end. See, now you've got to send statements, you've got to deal with the aftermath of sending statements, you have to follow up on insurance claims, you have to follow up on patient collections and try and collect money over the phone. It just creates a big monster, and it adds to the busyness and takes away from the profitability. Another indicator might be your team communication. Maybe you're all on different islands and you're frustrated because somebody else on the team isn't seeing things the way you're seeing them, when the reality is you are too busy to even stop and communicate. And so that's just another big indicator, and quite frankly, another big obstacle that's getting in the way of your success. Again, these three things are indicators that you are not operating at your full potential. These can be killers to your practice. They can stress you out. They can make you hate dentistry. And the fun thing about all of this is we have solutions. And I get really excited when I have the opportunity to share and to be able to work with practices who are having these same challenges, because I know we can help.